How's everyone doing? Yay. It's great to be the first one after a break because you should all be feeling very refreshed. And I hope I keep you refreshed for the rest of the sessions before lunch. I'm Oge Opara-Nadi, VP of Engineering at Hey Savvy. Hey Savvy is a fashion tech startup. Think Shazam meets Spotify, but for fashion. And the goal is that you can snap, search, try, buy in 60 seconds. That goal is after we launch, not before we launch. Cool. A little bit more about me. I have been in software engineering for a long time, over 20 years. I have this running joke. If you've heard me speak before, you've probably heard it for about the 15th time now, that when I started off, engineers were called programmers, not developers. Developers were people who built houses. And before I get into the plan, I want to give a shout out to Monica. Is Monica in here? But Monica was really looking forward to this, so I hope she's here and she gets to see it. Cool. So, clicker. My only challenge, I promise. Thank you. Yay. So this is the plan of what we're going to cover. And as you're all in software engineering, you know that nothing ever goes to plan in software engineering. But we will try to stick with this. We will talk about metrics versus strategy. We'll talk about what we're doing wrong. We'll talk about what data-driven engineering excellence should look like. We'll talk about some frameworks, but we're not going to dive into the frameworks because there isn't a one-size-fits-all. And then I'll talk a bit about some of the insights I've gotten with data that I've collected and what action I drove with it. And then we'll wrap up. Sound good? OK. Well, those are the slides, so. Cool. So what is metrics versus strategy? Typically, we love metrics in our line of business, especially as senior leaders. We like to collect the data. We like to know what is who doing, what are we measuring, etc. But times often, we collect metrics because they're easy to collect. So we have fancy tools that give us the numbers. We build dashboards. We take them to the exec suite. We say, this is going up and this is going this way. But what we're not actually doing is actually tracking in a way that we can leverage those insights to make engineering leadership decisions. So I've seen companies where they track absolutely everything, and they put them together in multiple tools, and they spit out all these numbers, and they spit out all these KPIs. But ultimately, when you actually talk to the engineers or to the teams, you find out that these are just noise. It's not actually driving the team to behave better. It's not driving the team to perform better. And it's not even delivering business goals in the way that the organization needs it to be. Oh, I forgot to say a thing. At the bottom of each slide, there's a TLDR. You don't need to try and read all the words. Like, literally, if you read that just one line, you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. So, like I said, I've been around about 20, 25 years now, and I took out 3 case studies that I've actually experienced in my career. And I have one company that had about 35 engineering teams, pizza-sized teams, so do the math, working really hard, pushing overtime, doing all of that, but not really delivering business outcomes. They were still shipping late. They were missing client deadlines. They were missing commitments. Had another company that was big on processes, and I was like, I'm going to love it here. And there were all these processes, and people were doing things because that's the way that we do things, but there was nothing coming out of that. A lot of the time, when you found out that teams were blocked and you go and you talk to the teams, it ended up being those processes that held them back, and that was because they were doing processes without necessarily understanding what is it that we're trying to achieve by having these processes in place. And then I had another company where engineers are doing great work, but the executive leadership didn't come from an engineering background. So all they got was X is done or Y is done, without any full understanding into why. This was an interesting one because they were delivering. But when I was in this company and I would meet with the CEO once a month, and he would say to me, okay, we're spending £22 million a year on engineering. Why? I'm like, but we're doing all of these great things. Like, yeah, but 22 million, really? So the problems here are very similar, where you have companies that are doing things, but ultimately it doesn't align with what the business is trying to do. Either it's missing out on delivering to clients, or it's not a justification for the size of the engineering team because there is that disconnect between what the metrics they capture is telling them, what the business and the investor strategy is, and what the engineers are actually doing on the ground. So, coming a bit lower down what we track things like velocity, we track story points, cycle time, deployment frequency, number of defects found after bugs, after we ship to production. We track MTTR, we track so many things. But ultimately, the things that we track mostly just tell us stuff. But the things that we need is when we track metrics and we set KPIs and we link them to our organizational OKRs, are we actually able to drive change? Because if not, it's just reporting, right? If you're not able to take the insights from the data that you're collecting to actually do something different or do something better, then collecting the data is a waste of time. Now, the problem with the things we track as well is that they just show output, right? We picked up a story and we worked on it for, 3 days, it's worth X many story points, gone. But what that doesn't tell you is, should we have prioritized that story? Should that story actually have taken 3 days? Did it take 3 days because we didn't refine it properly? Or did it take 3 days because we thought we refined it properly, and after we ship it to production, we're going to do some rework on that story? You're not going to get that by just tracking velocity and story points, but when you start to combine the data that you get with the strategy that you've set, then you can actually go, yes, that data point makes sense in the context that I need it to make sense, and this is how I can switch it to derive better value. What the data we collect today also doesn't tell us is, it doesn't tell us how the team is doing. And this is where developer experience comes into the mix. Because you can have a team or multiple teams who are delivering very, very well. I actually had this. I do coaching on the side, and one of the people I'm coaching is a chief product officer. And their challenge is that things get delivered, things are being shipped, the product is live and it's doing well, but the rate of attrition is so high. And they couldn't make the connection between the two. And when we started unpacking this over a series of sessions, we realized ultimately that the problem is the engineers are not happy. The rate of attrition is high because people are not wanting to stay. And why are people not wanting to stay? It's because the culture and the experiences that they have within that organization is having an impact on their personal life. And I'm a firm believer that writing the code is the easy part. The software engineering is the easy part. The hard part is connecting that to human beings. And ultimately, we are human beings building the products, and we are building products to serve other human beings. So fundamentally, that's what we need to keep sustainable. We need to keep ourselves sustainable, as well as the impact we make to our customers or clients sustainable. And once we create that disconnect, then it becomes two separate things that happen in isolation, and one is not going to thrive. And typically, it's the human beings that suffer. You might be shipping a lot of work, but are you shipping good work? Are you shipping quality work? Are the people who are working on your products happy to be working on your product? Do they feel supported? Do they feel collaborative? Do they have the opportunity to be creative or to be innovative? You're not going to find that from StoryPoint. You're not going to find that from Velocity. You're not going to find that from, how long it takes to fix a bug in production. So what we need to be focusing on is data-driven engineering excellence. Now, I love the term engineering excellence because for me, engineering excellence is about taking the people, the tech, and the processes and making something beautiful out of it. That's what I've done for the last 12 years, and I absolutely love it. But
I really hope you're enjoying this video. Do you know Lead Dev offers way more than this?
I'm a fan of the Lead Dev newsletter. I find really practical knowledge about leadership.
Then I was like, oh, there is this big community here doing all of these content, so let me figure out a little more, let me dig in a little, what do you have?
So make sure you check out leaddev.com.
we've come to a point where it's very easy now to get the data, but how do we use the data with leading? How do we use that data to steer the organization? How do we use that data to make informed choices, not just about our stack, not just about our products, but also about our people? And when I say our people here, I'm not saying, are they productive? No, I'm saying, are they effective? As a leader, are you able to help your teams maximize their potential because you can dive into their intrinsic motivations and apply that into the way that they work and apply that into the way that they can be successful? So when you're collecting data, does it tell you where people are blocked? When you're collecting data, does it tell you where people need support? When you're collecting data, does it tell you that the priorities that you have set based on the organizational OKRs, if it's all top-down, does it feed back bottom-up? So what metrics should allow us to do is metrics should allow us to be able to make calculated risks. They should allow us to make calculated decisions. They should also allow us to change our minds. They should allow us to try different things. They should allow us to experiment. Because if we're just measuring and actually not applying any insights from what we measure, again, we're measuring for the sake of measuring, optics, but no value. So there are a heap loads of frameworks out there. I'm not going to stand here and say that one is better than the other, but I'll tell you what I do. So when Dora was the big shining toy, I started playing with it. I got a lot of value with it. But I immediately realized after a few cycles of just using Dora, especially when I tried it across different kinds of teams, I found that it was telling me the good stuff. It was telling me things that, okay, this is probably how I can help this team ship faster. But again, like the current challenge that my coachee has, it didn't tell me if it was the tweaks I was making, were they sustainable, were they impacting the team negatively, was they allowing an engineer to grow? I mean, I'll tell you a good test is if your team cannot have an intern, then it should tell you something about the culture of your team. Because many times you bring an intern into an area and it's like, oh, we're too busy to support this person. And you might be able to ship to production 20,000 times a day. But if you can't support somebody else, then there's a problem somewhere that you probably need to address. So I started using Dora along with Space, because what Space allowed me to do was to look at not just the tech factor, but to look at the human factor as well. Because Dora would tell me what's been delivered and how it's been delivered, but Space tells me what drives that delivery, what enables that delivery. So again, it's not about use this framework or that framework. It's about pick what works for the strategy that you've defined, but only don't look at it from one dimension. Look at it from multiple dimensions. And the reason I've given this example is if you're not using any frameworks, these are two very simple ones to start to experiment with. And it's not about we have to do all the things all at once. Pick one metric, pick the right thing for the specific question you want to answer, for the specific strategy or vision that you have, but balance it from different angles. Oh, so here are some choice metrics I've picked, what they told me. So again, not about what was captured, but what insight I derived from it and what changes I was able to drive. So we had a spike in cycle time, what that allowed us to do was review where the bottlenecks are, right? And it wasn't about what is this bottleneck and how do we make it go away, but understanding the way that you would do a incident review is we've identified a problem, let's try and identify the root cause of that problem. And in this particular organization, it's actually one of the organizations that I showed in the previous slide, it turned out that the problem was in PR review. The reason the problem was in PR review was that the team depended on a couple of heroes. So everybody wanted person 1 and person 2 to look at their PRs. And the team wasn't empowered and didn't have that sense of autonomy to go, actually, I am confident to contribute to this peer review, even though I'm not person 1 or 2. And once we were able to address that and empower the whole team to start doing that, we noticed that the PR review cycles got shorter because those 2 people were no longer the bottlenecks. In another situation, we were doing space metrics, we were collecting developer satisfaction scores. This organization used to do an employee survey once a year, but I said no, within engineering, we'll do NPS surveys every quarter. And we noticed that this was dropping. And what we identified was risk of burnout. And again, it came up to some key individuals within the team who were expected to take lead on X many things. And if I recall correctly, this was actually a case where a senior contributor had also taken on a managerial role. And that's typical in our tech sector. We tend to promote people into managerial roles without giving them the managerial support that they need. So this person was trying to balance people management that they were doing for the first time with being the senior contributor within the team. That was super challenging. So what did we do? We understood their pain points. We gave them the option, and we said, you don't have to do this forever. This is not the end of the road. So why don't you focus on just the people leadership for 1 quarter, step away from the IC stuff, and if that doesn't suit you, step back into the IC stuff. It turned out in the end that when they were able to focus on the people leadership, what that meant was that they got the necessary support, they got the necessary training, we had them in the necessary focus groups and working groups to support themselves and other people that were in the same situation. They were actually able to balance it with doing IC work. They chose to continue doing IC work, but they were able to do it in a way that was sustainable, that limited that feeling of burnout. And this would have been a key person within the organization. If they had left, an entire department, which isn't great, would have been at risk because not only were they a contributor, code contributor, they were somebody that the other people, even from across departments, looked up to. So they were quite integral to the organization. But my point here is that when we look at signals beyond, we're shipping code quickly or we have a low defect rate, there is always going to be a human element involved. And we need to identify those things in order to help our teams succeed. Third example, this is actually more recent, as in within the last 4 or 5 years, where there was a whole lot of unplanned work. So this team did Kanban. I was having a conversation with Manuel. I don't know if Manuel is in here last night. This team did Kanban, and the nature of our work is that it's not plannable, but it also meant that a lot of work came in from the side. So they were not predictable. They couldn't commit to delivery. And for me as an engineering leader, I appreciate the challenges. I did do software engineering for a good 15 years before I went into leadership. But that's not what I'm going to say in the boardroom. That's not what I'm going to say to the CEO. I need to understand, if you say you're going to do X, is it going to be done? And if it's not going to be done, I need to understand what's the route for us to get there. And in this particular example, the problem ended up being that there wasn't enough investment into non-functional requirements. So what that meant was when they shipped stuff to production, they had to do a lot of rework. And I tried something very interesting with this one because it was a domain that was owned by about 5 teams under me. So what I said to them at this point was, well, everybody can't be on incident management all the time. that's causing its own problems. So what we changed was actually the way that we structured the works within the cycles. So yes, you're doing Kanban, but we need to have a fixed scope of work that allows you to do preventative work. We also need to change our way of working and stop thinking of ourselves as 5 different teams, but think of us as a group that own the platform, that own this domain. And what that means is we need to have a shared understanding of supporting this infrastructure. What that meant was that everybody became more knowledgeable across the board. There were a lot more tech learn and shares, but it also meant that there was a lot less stuff that was going into the production that was broken, which meant a lot less rework. So again, this is not something that I would have seen just by seeing the number of tickets that went through in a fixed time period. So what do I have for you today is there is a lot of information out there on how to capture metrics, on how to use them to shape your KPIs, and how to link those KPIs to your organizational key results and objectives. But it's also a lot to take on, because every organization is different, every team is different, and every individual within your team is different. So I can't give you a recipe that worked for me and expect it to work for you. But what you can do is you can go and look at one thing. You may be tracking stuff already. Just pick one of them, whichever takes your fancy, and go, is this metric actually telling you what you think it's telling you? And what assumptions have you baked into this metric that you are tracking or that you plan to track? Is it helping your teams deliver better? Or is this just something that you report on? Because if you want high-performing teams, you need to start measuring what actually drives them to that optimal performance. And it's been about 22 minutes I've been talking, and I fully appreciate if you haven't held everything in. So even if you forget everything I said, this is a summary of it all. You haven't missed anything. They should be more than performance indicators. They should be more than optics. They should actually be things that help you move your company ahead. Even your culture, the organizational culture, can be shaped by what you track. Because remember as well, software engineers, we're very smart people. Give us a number, we will gamify it. So look for things that actually help your organizations move forward and measure that and make it collective. Again, as leaders, it's very easy to kind of sit in the ivory tower and ask for these numbers. But even when you're speaking to your managers or your managers of managers and they're providing these numbers to you, ask them what those insights are. When you have your skip level meetings, find out what the engineers care about, because what you might think matters as a leader might not be what matters to the team. So you need to come to a point where what you're measuring, the metrics you collect, the frameworks that you use align not just with senior leadership or engineers or teams, but tie it into the culture you want to create within your engineering organization and within the wider organization. And that is the end of my presentation. If you want to talk to me about children, because I accidentally ended up with too many, those 3 are triplets, not intentional. And of course, having triplets is not enough, so I have a 4th. I also have 2 cats and a few fish that are not thriving very well, actually. I just got a phone call that we probably need to do something because one fish has gone missing. But thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it.